Okay. No, wrong browser. Not that one. That one.
Welcome to your awakening. Please take care as your reality is adjusted.
Please remain patient while I click loads of buttons and try and figure out what I'm doing this time. It gets better every week. I think it's become habitual now. So there has to be some kind of just bumbling at the start, at the beginning, when I'm clicking all the buttons and doing all the thing. Hopefully that maybe helps to demonstrate the amateur thing that's going on here. What's going on with that now? Where's it gone? Oh, clicked the wrong bloody button. Hopefully you can still hear me. Welcome, folks, back again. Welcome back again on this Moon Day evening. Yeah, gone 8 p.m. Just gone the 2000 hours because I'm clicking the wrong buttons like a spanner. That button. Come on, do it. I've got to wait for the lag to catch up as well. Yeah, this star date, the 25th of the 11th, 2019, 25th of November. Yeah. If you wonder about the connection between the names of the months and the actual numerical position in the calendar, November's the 11th month, but November means 9. December, DEC, DEC means 10. So what's going on here is because there's 2 months added when we changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. But it also enables a certain amount of interesting correlations between the wordplay and the numbers of the actual dates. So it's not my intention to get into any kind of gematria stuff, but just to point out that 9 and the 11th and the 9th. And of course, it creates even more confusion when you got the differences in date format between different countries or different cultural areas. UK uses day, month, year, and America and the USA, they use month, day, year. So you get 9/11 twice in the year if you follow media from both sides of the Atlantic. Yeah, so you experience 9/11 twice a year. It's funny that. But anyway, tonight I just want to go over a couple of things from, just one thing mainly from last week, but just to sort of do a bit of kind of housekeeping and mention a few things from that. And then other than that, I was just going to chat in general. The subtitle tonight is WIP, Work in Progress. And I will mention a few things because I think they're possibly indications of larger scale agendas that are works in progress. Can make a very extensive argument about how everything is a work in progress. The only constant is change, apart from the constant that is the base layer that all this stuff is coming from, that then transmutes during its existence, and we experience windows of time to view that thing. So at the moment it looks like one thing, but come back in a million years and it'll look like something else. Yeah, but the general constant that we experience is that of change. Just some of the things take longer. So your experience might seem like, oh, this is fairly permanent, but hey, just give it long enough. It'll change. It's a work in progress. This is God's work in progress. Yeah. But anyway, that could end up in a semantic argument. Just to mention, sort of connected to religious figures. I think God's far beyond religion, but this next one is a religious figure. I find the timing of this quite interesting when it's connected alongside a lot of the other things that have been going on recently. But the Pope, a few days ago, put out a statement, an official kind of statement about stuff, denouncing weapons of mass destruction, primarily nuclear weapons, I think is what they were really sort of, trying to put the onus on. But I find it interesting that he himself, the man of all religions, because he's the main one that we get constantly told about. I know in other countries, in other cultures, there will be more relevant and important to that culture. There'll be other figures that they're constantly told about. But for us in the Western world, it's usually the Pope. The Pope is like the head of religion, whether you're Catholic or not. He's considered kind of like, the biggest man in religion, in the religion game. So him putting out statements, I'm not suggesting that everything he says is going to be meaningful or have some kind of relevance to stuff that's happening, but keeping an ear to that information stream and critically thinking about whether the things you've been presented with are propaganda or something else. The usual kind of process that you should be applying to all information sources. And I find it highly non-coincidental that he's making these kind of statements now, where the current war footing across the globe is gradually increasing as the months are going on. Saw reports from Iraq over the last few days, the numbers of fatalities there, because the official forces are trying to put down rebellious forces amongst the public, prevent an uprising, even though in many ways it's portrayed as a protest, a democracy protest maybe. And similar applied to Iran. The usual methodology of public disruption and bringing in the chaos, and NGO and outside funded manufactured revolution groups are agitating the situation there, causing destruction and injury and possibly fatalities. There have been some fatalities in Iran, but not on the scale of what's going on in Iraq. And then, of course, you can amplify that by a laundry list of other countries where similar things are happening. And Hong Kong at the moment is, it looks like potentially everything there is going to settle down for a bit again, because they had a landslide victory for the democracy side of things. But that perfectly suits the propaganda here in the West, where, we're going to bring democracy to you. We're going to bomb the democracy into you. And it's commonly part of that methodology of manufactured unrest, manufactured revolution. So the Pope sort of throwing that chunk of meat into the middle of the Colosseum. So, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons. We need to change the world and get rid of these nuclear weapons. Feeds many agendas, and the timing coming up towards Christmas time, he's sort of stating his anti-war case, ready for the celebrations over the Christmas period. Nah, not coincidental. And in a fractal, smaller fractal emanation of that, just show this screenshot Gary's got. That's one of Andrew's mates, isn't it? I don't mean Charlie boy. I mean, the one in the thong. That thong looks a bit tight, but in a sort of smaller fractal fashion. Here in the UK, over the last couple of days, we've been hearing about a gang brawl or a mass brawl between multiple people at a cinema complex which is near the infamous Spaghetti Junction in Birmingham, not far from the city centre. It's about half a mile out of the city centre. And this is an area that I've lived in for almost, well, certainly most of my life. 30 plus years I've lived in and around that area. I don't anymore. I moved out of Birmingham a decade ago. I've got enough of the city, and I've been slowly moving further and further away from those dense urban areas as they're being turned into virtual gulags. But yeah, to cut a long story short, the place is an area called Star City, which is like a little multiplex of cinemas and restaurants and bars. You know, it's an entertainment zone, and it was part of a renovation phase that they did across Birmingham when the Labour Council got into power and decided to start spending vast amounts of public money to turn Birmingham into the real second city, sort of stake that claim as being the second city in the UK. And that's when they started the agenda towards building the high-speed rail connection to save themselves an extra 20 minutes from London to Birmingham and all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of renovation that's happened in the city centre, you know, knocking down the old city centre and building new, you know, office blocks, business environments, as well as expensive apartment blocks and gated community blocks, things like that. So it's all very much this Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 new mega city environment. And they've been working on that for at least a decade plus, since the early 90s. Now, this entertainment zone was built near enough right next to Spaghetti Junction so that it's got good access from all over the city. And I'm sure they were thinking, like, you know, it'd be good for business because people can come from all over the city to visit this zone, go shopping and go to the cinemaplex and whatever. But it also acts as a magnet to a lot of the gang conflicts and the neighborhood conflicts, the cultural conflicts. They all tend to congregate in that area. It's become like a gathering zone for these kind of effects. And a long time ago, many years ago, for those people who live in that area, it became called Stab City rather than Star City, because the occurrences of that kind of violence were regular. So it's not like it was something unusual. You know, you hear about another fight at Star City, another stabbing. It was not unusual. But this recently, the past few days, is a mass brawl, supposedly. You know, loads of people fighting with each other. Again, it's gang conflict, most likely. I'm presuming a little bit without digging into lots of detail, but my main reason for covering this is because of how it connects into that element of weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass distraction, weapons of mass dysfunction. Because what RT loves to show, you know, RT loves the riot porn, and this is where they reveal their agenda-driven directives to do a kind of subtle population disruption. You know, the situations in Iraq and Iran are more direct. You know, they're not exactly subtle, even though they're hidden in shadow work of the NGOs and agents that are handling the situation and using people in the country to create the movements that then create the protests, that then create the violence, etc. RT also likes to use that constant subtle propaganda media effect of, oh, look, there's riots in your country. Oh, look, your country's falling apart. Oh, look at the state of your politics. It's common tactics on either side of the fence. You know, the Western media do it continuously about Russia. The Russian media do it continuously about the Western media. So no surprise that RT is showing you that kind of story, because they want you to see that kind of story. But again, the timing of this is all a bit much of a muchness to me. Maybe that's my perception of it. But the fact that they wanted to concentrate on the, hey, look, everyone, a mass brawl with knives and machetes and all this, people using that kind of weaponry in Birmingham, in the Birmingham city centre and areas around that city centre. Again, this is not something new. This has been happening for a long time, long before they started the narrative about knife crime needing to be dealt with in the UK. There's a gun culture within Birmingham amongst the gangs. So why don't they deal with the gun problem before they start constantly propagandizing people about a knife problem? All part of this narrative of we need to control these areas more strictly. We need maybe one thing they'll suggest is the kind of stop and search or stop and frisk or security entrance and exit zones. So they'll have methods similar to an airport where people will be scanned or searched by hand before you're allowed into this entertainment zone. So again, further adding to that New World Order, Agenda 21, mega super city virtual gulag environment. High security, but more hidden. The walls are more hidden. The fences are more virtual than they are physical. But it is a highly secure digital prison system. So I thought maybe it is just RT wanting to propagandize any story they can get their hands on, and lo and behold, there's another story about stuff happening at Stab City and all that kind of thing. But it's been all over the UK press as well. So that may be feeding the narrative of that knife crime problem and the need to control the large gatherings of people. So again, bringing in more legislation to say whether you can or cannot gather in certain numbers or certain areas, things, loads of potential surveillance and security aspects to it. And weapon of mass dysfunction being used as a weapon of mass distraction. Meanwhile, as we approach the election process here in the UK, a lot of the press is fairly dedicated to that, promoting all the election stuff, having the debates between the two jokers, and the usual kind of, party political broadcasts and whatever. I thought it was fun as well that JC promising free broadband for Christmas. And I thought this was just so ironic. Again, there may be further connections to this that I'm just dubious about saying yes, there is, because it could just be, even though a low probability, it could still just be coincidental. But I find it highly dubious that now we're on to the third week. In total, it's been about 17 days, I think, since my internet basically got cut almost. It's like there's a tiny thread of a cable hanging on somewhere. That's the impression I get, because my landline phone still doesn't work and my internet is still averaging about 1.5, 1.6 meg download speed, supposedly. Yet I'm still managing to be able to sustain this, And at the same time, we're coming up to the YouTube new wave of censorship and how there's going to be this process of getting rid of the non-commercially viable channels, excuse, plausible deniability cover. And then JC starts promising free broadband for Christmas. And I'm like, wow, what's going on here? Because when I can get hold of BT, British Telecom is the ISP I've got at the moment at this property. I tried getting in touch with them via the online chat service last week so that I could ask what the hell's going on. I haven't heard from any of the engineers. You haven't said if you're trying to fix my problem. What's happening? and I got the usual kind of response interaction. At first, I thought it might be a robot, but they insisted they were not a robot. Even though their use of the English language was terrible, I thought it's probably some poor guy in a foreign call center somewhere. Insisted he was a robot. I was like, okay, what are you going to do about this problem? He goes, well, we need to run some tests on your line. Is it okay if we run some tests on your line? Yeah, I've done this before. Why are you repeating it? But okay, get on with it. It's like, right, okay, we'll do this. And then, what color is the light on your router at the moment? So it's green, it's working. What color is the light on your router at the moment? And I was just trying to type, it's red, and the twat had cut me off. So I'm like, what's going on? Chat room closed. Can't interact with it anymore. Oh. And then I get an email from them saying, we're registering your complaint about the problems with your connection. I was like, oh, good. So they've actually, they took notice of what I said. They've registered it as a complaint. But then I get another email a couple of days later saying, your complaint has been closed. Right, but you ain't said anything's happening. What's going on here? And in between all this, they sent me a spam advert for fiber, upgrading to a fiber connection. It said, there's fiber available in your area. Get a free upgrade. And are you doing this deliberately? Have you deliberately downstepped my connection in some fashion in the hope that when I get frustrated with it because, I've got to have internet, then I'm going to get in touch with you and go, please give me the upgrade because I just got to have a connection. And then at the same time, we got JC promising free broadband for Christmas if you vote for them. It's like they're promising everything, though. So, they're promising they're going to make cats that love dogs and, just anything you want. Labour is promising everything. But I find it all very, very strange that all this is happening at the same time as we're approaching the election. And there's all these changeovers occurring. I don't want to get into it much, but just to mention it, the Prince Bug-off speech that I was talking about last week, and this process of a switchover. Even though I know, it's not exactly a complete and concluded situation. There's obviously loads of questions. There's a lot further that this could potentially go into investigations and maybe even court cases and whatever. But it's sort of concluded. A part of it has concluded in such that he's come forward doing that interview, which is like a tacit admission, at least, to the fact that he had the association with Epstein and Epstein did not kill himself. And the other situations, such as the photographs and the partying and all that kind of stuff. He's basically admitting that. And the Queen has kicked him out of his official duties. So they are throwing him under the bus in one way. So is that a conclusion of a certain element of that narrative that has been played out? And is that closing off of that narrative also part of the bigger narrative of this changing of the age? The older institutions, which includes things like Prince Andrew as an institution, not the individual, but the office, the element, the archetype that he represents or fills the role of, that's being closed off. You're now going to get the new royals, the younger couples, like we talked about over the last few weeks. They're going to be presented instead. The old guard is being swept out, and they're hoping they can do it in such a way where they give a little into the Colosseum. They throw a little bit of red meat. They throw some scapegoats out like Weinstein and Epstein. Epstein. Yeah, don't connect too much to the names. Or no, Wienerstein. Yeah, they've thrown several scapegoats into the ring to be mauled by the mob, but the network that enables these individuals to operate, because the individuals are not acting alone and they're not acting in a vacuum. They are part of a network of enablers that allow it to happen or make it happen for various reasons. It's not going to affect that. And they're hoping that in a similar fashion to the way they played the Jimmy Savile situation, oh, it's done now. He's been kicked out of office now. So, he's not going to be in that position anymore. So let's just forget about it and move on. Move on to the next chapter, the new royals, the new younger couples that are squeaky clean and have this great media presentation, etc., etc. And then thinking through those things over the week, and I will come back to sort of do the housekeeping stuff I mentioned earlier, but thinking through those things over the week and looking at it from the point of view of, well, we've had this Mercury retrograde, and although, I can't say I'm a believer in astrology because people get too hung up on absolutes and black and white thinking about stuff, and it's sort of, well, I can't say I absolutely believe it, but over many years, multiple decades now, of looking into this kind of subject matter and these areas of knowledge and investigation, so I can't say that there's nothing to it. I'm sorry, I don't agree with people that say it's total bunkum and whatever. No, there's something to it, certainly. It's just that maybe our comprehension of it is not that great, so we end up with this kind of middle ground, this grey area that can then be exploited by unscrupulous people who see it as a way to manipulate others and get money out of them and whatever. In other words, selling your crap, selling your bunkum just to get $1 out of you. You get that in all areas of subject matter, not just things to do with like astrology and esoteric questions and whatever. But over the week, I've been thinking, is this something to do with the Mercury retrograde and the Mercury transit that we just had? We're having this period where you're sort of going back on yourself to look at things that had already been known about, as in it's been known about for quite a long time that Andrew was a party prince and that he had associations with not only Epstein, but also a lot of other people that are dubious nature. And then it's sort of bringing that forward and concluding it. Like I say, I'm not suggesting that it's an absolute conclusion as the problem has been dealt with and justice has been done or anything, or not at all. But the element of it's sort of out in the open now, even though there's no major details, and even though a lot of the general public still see this as being kind of like, oh, he was a bit of a scallywag, so what? And it's like, oh, no, he was not just a bit of a, womanizer, to put it nicely. No, not at all. He was, potentially connected to things that were a lot worse and a lot darker than that, and fulfill the requirement of perpetuating and extending that network of control that is based on those very things, those problems of blackmail and people succumbing to the worst elements of their nature and all the kind of bad shit. Is that being concluded? Is that the burning off of the old guard, the phoenix effect of we're burning away the old, When I've often talked about this phoenix effect, and I do still think this year has been absolutely intrinsic to that, and there's certain astrological elements that have made me think this all along, but there's often the misconception, I think, that many people see it as being literally, physically, things being burnt down or destroyed. So certain figures, such as old Charlie boy with his whatever his ring is on his finger that you were trying to point at earlier, Gary, I can't quite make it out. It's gold something, but people have this impression that it will be the literal physical thing that gets killed off or burnt away, destroyed. And that's part of it, yes, but don't limit the concept to the purely physical. There are elements, metaphysical elements, purely conceptual elements, elements about law and legality and divinity that are being systematically stripped away and burnt off to be replaced by something new, something neo, that is often just an amalgamation of already known stuff. They've just put it under a new name and painted it a different color now. You know, now it's been painted with rainbow paint. But is it all just a part of this transition period that we're experiencing? And saying it that way, I don't mean to imply that there's nothing you can do about it. You know, I don't agree with that. That's one element of stoicism that I don't agree with. You can't just sit back and let it happen. Not everything. Some things, yeah, but I think that's all pretty obvious to most people. That would then bring us to those kind of questions of, like, you know, a moral foundation. And it does seem very much that a major part of the problems that we've been going through for the last several years is that shaking of people's moral foundations such that it can be reformed. So the Phoenix effect being applied to the moral standards of most populations, so that now you'll accept something different. What you would have thought before was something worse. I've tried to describe it before with the metaphor, the concept of they ask for a mile so that you give an inch. The old saying usually is, you know, if he asks for an inch, if you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. Yeah, as in, don't give way, because then they'll pull harder. Yeah, you give an inch, they take a mile. But over the years, thinking about this kind of stuff and thinking about the way the gradualism process is used to nudge, push and pull effect. Yeah, they use both sides of the process, the Hegelian left-right bullshit, push and pull. But the way they gradually nudge people further and further and further along their line. You know, 20 years ago, if they asked for that mile, you'd say, no, you can't jump that far. That's way too far. But we'll allow you this little bit. And then another 10 years, oh, we'll allow you this little bit. And then over time, over generations even, you find that you've gone from there to there. You know, and you've gone from not accepting paedophilia as just being a gender orientation to accepting paedophilia as being a gender orientation. That's the way gradualism works. Yeah? You might not experience the radical change within your lifetime, but your children or your grandchildren will probably experience it. Just takes little bits, little nibble. All right, let's get to just a quick sort of, well, it's partly housekeeping, but it's also to demonstrate what some bits of what I was on about last week. I need screen share just for this bit. That one, click the button quick. I'm not sure if I'll be able to look at the control room while I'm showing this, can I? Oh, maybe I can. Okay, cool. It's just last week's episode, and I come back earlier today to read through all the chat, because you know what I'm like tonight. I forgot I haven't even said hello to everybody in the chat yet. I've been too busy rambling. But always at some point I read through the chat, I read through all the comments at some point. I don't always get the chance or the inclination to reply to every comment, but I do see them all, hopefully, and read them all. But I did mention a while ago the kind of weird, I shouldn't say weird because it is deliberate, it's just out of the ordinary from my point of view. The way the GooTube is manipulating the environment, such that, you know, you look at the comments under the video and you probably, you know, you see several comments. But what they don't tell you is that you have to go to the sort by section, select news first, and then you get all the comments. That initial view that you were looking at was nothing like all the comments. And it was none of, so, you know, there again, there's more that I hadn't seen. There's none of the comments that have a link in them. So if somebody posts a comment that has a link in them, like Patrick Neo's and Jack Locker's there, yeah, they don't show up at all on that initial view. So for a lot of people accessing YouTube these days, the way you access it is more likely by a mobile device, a phone or a tablet. I know this isn't true for everyone. Like I'm still on it's a laptop, but it's still a PC on the desk. But a lot of people are accessing these services via mobile phones and tablets. And on that view, you don't see the layout of the screen in the same way as you do on a computer monitor, a desktop monitor. So you don't notice half the time that when you're scrolling down, you're like, oh yeah, I'll read the comments, scroll down. Oh yeah, there's a few comments, but there's only 6 or 7 comments. Oh, well, no, read through the ones that are there. And you probably don't realize that there's all these other comments that YouTube has just not showed you, just quietly sort of put out of sight in the hope that you won't notice. And their plausible deniability will be, well, we left you the functionality so that you can find them because, look, you just did it by clicking the sort by button. So therefore, we're not hiding them. It's just plausible deniability bullshit. They are deliberately doing that because they know a lot of people will not even think or know about that filter button. So they'll just think, oh, there's only a few comments under here and they don't say much of anything. They don't even think to go, oh, I need to check, are there any comments that have been shadow banned from my view? And at the same time, I noticed this last night, when I was just checking on stuff. There's a lot of comments that have been posted on here that I've had no notification about whatsoever. Like I didn't get one of the little bell notifications when it said, it'll tell you there's a new comment under your video or whatever. So they're deliberately, making it more difficult or making it more likely that you will miss things or you'll just bypass them because you don't know they're there in the first place without having to actually dig to find them. So I wanted to mention that, but also just from up to the point of when I'd seen the comments anyway, like I say, because half of them I haven't even been notified about, like all the links that Gary had put in. And there's some really good videos in these links. If you want to dig into some of the subjects that we're often talking about, there's some good links in there to work your way through, and yet YouTube is just like obscuring them deliberately. But there was a couple of points that, if I can find which little thread it was on, it was just one of the points that Jack had put in, if I can find it again. I'll try and summarize it from memory. Oh, there it is. Free speech being used against free speech last week. He's saying that that's a contradiction. It's like, yes, it is a contradiction. The system works with inversions. So, yeah, free speech as a purely logical function, the concept of free speech cannot negate itself. So it can't be used against itself. It doesn't make any sense logically. But the system doesn't work with sense, not when they're manipulating things to benefit themselves. So yes, it's a contradiction, but the system will use an inversion. And that's, what I was trying to explain last week, and what I was talking about was the fact that the system uses people's miscomprehension, deliberately taught miscomprehension of things like free speech, so that then they can manipulate the thinking of the general populace to follow their then suggested proposals. So they want to be able to have control over free speech. So to deliberately create the justification in the public's mind that they need to control free speech, they put in front of the public, they put into the public's ear holes the worst elements of speech out there. And this is not in the kind of situation where they know the person receiving the message has had some philosophical teaching or learning such that they can go, oh, well, I don't agree with what this guy is saying, but he's got the right to say it, free speech, I'll listen to it, but what he's saying is abhorrent and wrong and incorrect on many levels. So I'll just, it's just an arsehole spouting at me, even though it's free speech. Yeah. But the system takes those worst elements that they know most of the general populace will not have the ability to apply that kind of comprehension to, and they bombard the public with those worst elements. So over the past several years, we've had this ongoing campaign about hate speech and bullying online. And just recently, as we've been leading up to the election, we've had the UK politicians again in Parliament repeating that mantra, talking about how they get constant threats and abuse online. So therefore, the public's free speech has to be controlled when it comes to interacting with the politicians. Yeah, so it's very much about controlling speech, but they're using free speech to their benefit as a weapon to attack others' abilities to speak freely. I know it sounds a bit convoluted, but I was just trying to describe how the methods of the propaganda work. Yeah, not talking about kind of purely logical functions being set against each other. We've been seeing this again this week, with that kind of discussion ongoing when it comes to things like the questions about the naughty prince, the sweatless miracle, and what can and can't be said about those kind of things, and that will carry on. So I think it's important to talk about that kind of stuff and talk about the difficult questions within that topic, which is the kind of questions like, well, yeah, we've got free speech, but what are people actually saying? And that was the main point I was trying to get across last week. It's like, if what you say is just a stream of abuse, then are you really making good use of the energy that is fueling your thinking? Or is your thinking being stunted into purely emotional knee-jerk reactions such that you get this stream of verbal abuse? If you think somebody's guilty of something, why don't you talk about what it is they're guilty of? Like in the case of Prince Andrew, here's somebody recounting all the evidence about when he was caught at different parties, partying with the women and touching them up and sweating all over them and stuff like that. You talk about those incidents and that trail of evidence and the reasoning of why you come to the conclusion that he's a downright dirty dog and all that kind of shit, instead of just going, "You're a dog, you're a dirty dog." There is no passing on from one to another of the critical reasoning process. So the conversation, the subject gets dragged down into the gutter and just gets shat all over until the average populace, the people in the average populace look at it and just don't want to know. They just go the other way because all they see is a big pile of shit. And that again is how the system has been using free speech against those of us who want free speech. You say you want free speech, here's a troll army that is going to gang stalk your channel and spend 24/7 bombarding your channel with abusive comments. Free speech? They do this, they've done this, this has happened to me in the past. And one of the classic kind of incidents was when they started trying to do porn bombing, when we used to do the Hangouts, the open Hangouts, and using the Google Hangout system, and the trolls would try to get on the open Hangout and just start showing hardcore porn because they knew that would get the channel shut down. Yeah, they would turn around and go, "Oh, you can't stop me, it's free speech." But they know full well that they're doing it deliberately to shut you up, which means they're using their free speech to try and stop your free speech. I know it's a difficult conversation, because people want to stick to absolutes, and you know, it becomes that kind of Gordian knot that cannot be. I was trying to think, that's why I was doing that shape. So the Gordian knot, you know, that shape that cannot be unraveled, and you end up in a perpetual argumentum ad infinitum, and that serves the purpose of the system perfectly. Thank you very much. You know, we could get into a long semantic debate about whether speech is actually free in the first place anyway, anywhere across the planet. You know, that's debatable. And you could also get into again, it's a bit of semantics, but a kind of literal debate about whether the terminology is very good or not anyway. Because when you say free speech, that can be misinterpreted as meaning that there are no consequences. And that's not a good idea to give people, because they can get themselves into shit. Yeah? If you give people that impression that you can just, it doesn't matter where you say what you say to whoever, you just go ahead and say it. Yeah, just say whatever's on your mind. And then one day you're sort of in a situation where you're at a cinema multiplex in Birmingham, near Birmingham city centre, and free speech, you happen to say something to somebody in the queue in front of you and he takes it the wrong way and pulls a machete out on you. Consequences. And in that sense, I'm talking about this kind of semantic argument of there's no such thing as free, allegedly. Yeah. So the speech has a cost. I tried to describe this a while ago. There's an episode I did called Speech is Free, but Words Cost Extra. Because there are costs, there are consequences to what you say or do in terms of, putting it out in a media form that other people can access. So the concept free speech is not exactly an accurate way of describing it. It would be better to call it speak freely, as in you can speak freely. Yeah, you can if you want, you can speak freely, but be aware, there may be consequences to what you say or what you bring forth. Whereas saying it as free speech makes it sound a little bit like there are no costs, there are no consequences. It's free, it's out of nowhere, it's out of nothing. But like I say, very semantic kind of shit to get into. But that was it, basically, that little kind of housekeeping stuff about how be aware of how GooTube, I call it GooTube because it's like YouTube is the YouTube arm of the Google alphabet company. So I call it GooTube. Plus, I think it gives a good idea of how, like Frank Zappa called it, I'm the slime oozing out of your TV set. It's this tube that projects goo into your consciousness. So the GooTube. The GooTube is playing with this environment with that kind of plausible deniability of, there's no comments to see here, folks. There's no interesting links that you might learn something from. Oh, no, don't look. Don't click that button. You might figure something out. And I know I'm being deliberately silly, but be aware this platform is already heavily controlled. It has been for a long time. If you're into, if you agree with the concept of free speech, don't be under the illusion that that's going on in this environment, even if people try to. The medium of the middleman of the GooTube system is there to interfere if it chooses to.
As you said, Cookie, it's a work in progress, isn't it?
Yeah. We're all a work in progress, and this transition is a work in progress. If we leave them to do all the work, or to do the work, they're not doing the actual hard graft. They're doing the bullshit. But if you leave them to do it all on their own, then they'll take it a certain direction. Whereas if you get involved in some way, and I'm not saying that means getting involved in politics, not at all. But if you get involved in what is happening in your world and what direction you go in, then you could have it go in a better direction.
Yeah, not seeing the bigger picture. Go on, Gary.
With relation to what you were saying about the Queen earlier on, I was listening to Mark Windows this week, and he was talking about how somebody that was connected with Charles Darwin on evolution, yeah, that tied into somebody had an agenda of taking evolution and using it to prove that there was no God because they wanted to overthrow the Queen, yeah. Because the Queen, I mean, the church had been arguing that the Queen ultimately gets her authority from God. And so they were chasing evolution for that purpose. And that reminds me about this big fight that's been going on for centuries, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. Yeah? And but before they attack the Queen and bring her down, you know, you can see the same thing taking place now, yeah? They've tried to destroy God. So where's the Queen's authority come from? Only tradition. Yeah. They're all being overthrown. Yeah.
It probably, it may have, maybe he has mentioned it. I haven't been paying any attention to any of the political campaigning. Not really, just little bits that I catch on the news here and there. But it wouldn't surprise me if Labour talk about dealing with the monarchy in some way. You know, some of the Labour Party have said this outright openly before. Like, I think Michael Foot talked about getting rid of the monarchy and stuff like that. So maybe they'll bring it up again with this opportunity. You know, he's promising everything. So maybe they'll promise that as well.
No. They'll all, but no. I think they'll all bend the knee.
Yeah.
I can say they'll all bend the knee, Cookie. They're all gonna. They're not gonna get rid of the monarchy. Yeah.
If you want that, man.
He did kiss the ring in the end.
I mean, Spain's had a Republican Party, a little, you know, really small political party for a long time. So at least it's in the narrative. But, you know, becoming a republic hasn't been in the British narrative for a long time, like I say, since Michael Foot. Yeah, I mean, your Daily Mail readers, we know how easily they're manipulated. And that's why they never talk about it, because once they bring it into the thing, if it's going to be there as a permanent fixture, a permanent part of the narrative for 5 years, then people might go along with it. But right now, it'd be a vote loser for sure. Because
I can't remember who was saying it, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the Labour side was talking about getting rid of the House of Lords. So in a way, they sort of, you know, move in that direction. I think it's all just part of the election bullshit, though, isn't it? You know, they'll promise everything. That's what I think.
They always do.
That's what I think. This Christmas, JC's just gone over the top, and he's promising everything.
Well, it just made me laugh because I've been seeing some things pop up over the last few days, and just it's like what Obama and the American presidents have all been doing. You know, they've gone over the top this time. It's like, wow. It's like this is none of this is going to happen. It's all lies and bullshit. All of it. This is just to get you to go out on a cold December day and go and vote, yeah, which they haven't done for over 100 years. So it'll be interesting to see how many people actually bother to even turn up. And who knows? I said it last week, lowest turnout ever probably, if they admit to it. You'll never probably find out anyway because they fudge it anyway. But yeah, and this extremity thing you talk, you know, the extremes they go to, extremes. And I've seen stuff again today. I was talking to you before I came on about Madonna drinking piss, you know, and things of this nature, you know, getting people to, you know, get into all kinds of dark stuff. And she's certainly the dark queen, isn't she, of music or pop music or whatever. The amount of people who sort of, you know, follow that sort of stuff and fill their heads full of shit is another thing to, you know, we could talk about. But, you know, this truth denied and freedom denied stuff is always, you know, that's it. It's denied. Exactly. You know, you get to truth. You see Prince Andrew's interview. Lies, all over the thing. You know, it's just blatant liar, but smoothed over, whatever. Step back from public duties. No one does anything. Yeah, and we all just carry on. And that's how it goes with the election. Everyone just seems to be lying is now just so out in the open, thanks to the Trumps and the, you know, those types of people over the last few years to just, you know, accept the worst of a worst type of person to be your ultimate bullshit leader, you know, in this madness of the, you know, the democracy, where if you don't agree with it, it'll drop a peace bomb on you. to get to accept it all. So, it's just all part of that. It's about normalizing acceptance. I did listen to a bit of Windows on the World. I didn't listen to the whole hour. I didn't have a chance before I came in tonight. So I'd listened to halfway through that, yeah, and make some good points in that as well. How society is being slowly sort of dismantled. And it's funny because it's like we're going back, rewritten and sort of, but we're going back to almost like, especially in the working environment, almost to the Victorian era. I've said this a few times. It's like almost we're going backwards in the sense of what we're getting, and what we're getting is a slice of whatever profit there is available. They don't seem to, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and everything's becoming more different anyway in the working environment because of the new technical era we're in. The robots are coming. They're taking over. So
well, not quite yet, Pete. I mean, there's a fast food place I go for coffee like every day.
Yeah, go on.
And now it's reached a point where, like in the morning as well, it could be any time of day, every other customer is a Glovo or a Let's Eat or a food delivery thing. Yeah, they're the ones coming into the place all the time. Yeah, every other customer, like they park their bike outside, they're picking up a couple of sandwiches and a couple of coffees, and they're delivering them. Yeah, and I'm thinking, oh, poor buggers, they can't get more than $1.50 a delivery. I mean, it's not much. So, wow, man. I mean, these people are not in a union. Yeah, they were striking here in Spain a few months back, yeah. And like, so I don't know what people thought of it, yeah, but I thought, well, they haven't got a union for a start. Yeah, I mean, but they do have the collective power of the fact that they're all young, fit guys, and when they say, we're not going to fucking deliver anything for a week, they don't, yeah? Because they're so poor anyway, most of them spend their time catching off each other and other people. Yeah, I mean, if that's the state of work. But the one interesting thing I noticed this week, if you can screen share, Cookie, I'm wondering just how much perhaps the Hong Kong situation has been manipulated, because they didn't want to lose outright, and no way did they want to send in the Chinese troops. So what they've done, they've had an election, right? And the top bar, the yellow bit, is pro-democracy, 2015. And then the bottom one is after this election result. Look at that, man. That's 450 councillors. And they've almost got like 85% majority now. Yeah, so the protesters are absolutely supported by the public. Yeah, and they've just had this great big election, and that is telling everybody, hey, look, voting can work. So they maybe flip the situation to try and get as much out of it as they can, which in other words is re-establishing trust in the voting system. Yeah, if the voting system can work in Hong Kong, get out there and vote for who you want, Jeremy or Boris.
Yeah, but
there could be this thing in the tail though with the Chinese. They'll still do what they want to do. If they come in, they'll do whatever.
But that's going to happen later, isn't it? In terms of the election here in the UK, that is a really good catalyst to show to a lot of the young people who are now getting sucked into that political theatre game, because they can show what the situation in Hong Kong is and go, look, the politics does work, the democracy does work. Look how great it is that's happening in Hong Kong.
Yeah,
and a lot of young people, especially the kind that are into like the Extinction Rebellion stuff, they'll be like, oh yeah, see, it works. Get out there and protest and we can get the system going.
We saw a similar thing here with New Labour. It doesn't mean anything's going to actually change. Sorry for being so cynical, but it is. Like, I mean, what will they actually do? What will change in Hong Kong? What will they be allowed to do by the Chinese authority who own them and will rule over them? So that's the other thing. And they've already, made comments. They're not pleased about certain things that have been happening with their legislation. So they're getting interfered, and they'll start interfere. They will. They hold the keys for that little, colony.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But like you say, Cookie, is like an advert to get you back into voting. But New Labour, we saw here in '97, supposed to be changing the world, or changing the world. You know what I mean? Changing everything. What did he do? What did Mr. Blair do? We won't talk about him too much, but yeah, he's saying today that both parties are unfit to rule.
That's good coming from him.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, these people who
Is he
do all
going to
these,
offer to form a new Labour, new Labour?
a new party, probably. Who
Uh,
knows? The way the chaos is at the moment, and like I say, a hung parliament looks like it's on the cards anyway. Just say that, you know, before I forget. I think it will be a hung parliament, as it is now, or we'll try and do a deal with something. But yeah, it'll be the same sort of chaotic reigns we've been, you know, having in charge for the past
yeah,
10, 11 years now. You know.
I'd also add the same caveat like you said. You know, I know I might sound cynical saying this, but I feel it needs to be put out in the open. This is all the saying that is based on the process going on as it is up to the 12th and the actual election. We've still got a couple of weeks to go yet, isn't it?
3
So
weeks.
there's quite a fair bit that can happen between now and then. And this was something else I wanted to mention in sort of connection to some of the stuff I was talking about, like the Pope making his little announcement about nuclear weapons and whatever. Have you noticed that over the past maybe 2 months, maybe not quite that long, certainly several weeks, the reports of what could be described as terrorist actions has dropped a lot out of certainly the UK press. I'd say the American press as well. As it's been mainly about the Trump impeachment in the American press.
Yeah.
So, and when I say terrorist actions, I don't mean things like a car explosion in Iraq, a car bomb in Iraq. Some of those things we are still getting reported to us, yeah? But what I'm talking about is things like the shooting events. There was a couple of shooting events in America within the last several weeks, but they were like a blip on the media. Yeah, they just didn't really surface, and they got trampled over by this Trump impeachment stuff instead. Yeah. So I'm pointing it out because I'm sat here looking at this situation, and I can say I've seen a similar pattern where it's like the breath before the dive. Yeah, it's like the cheesy cliche, the calm before the storm. It's like they stopped talking about that subject for a little while because, you know, they've been doing their work, putting that propaganda out into the public's mind for however long, but they give it a little rest so that when the next one comes in, it has more impact. Because it's not like you've seen something similar yesterday, so you're still in shock from the event that happened yesterday, and there you go, now here's the next big one kind of thing, yeah? That reduces the impact. So they leave a little sort of mental breathing space so that when the next one comes in, it's going to have a bigger impact. And I don't want to be, you know, all doom about it, but I just noticed this. It made me think, like, are they holding back deliberately because something's going to go pop fairly big, just as we're leading up to not only the elections here in the UK, but also the elections in America. Yeah, I know they've got a bit longer to go, several months yet to go to theirs, but this is all on a roll. You know, there's been a lot of elections over the last several months in different countries. And we've had this rolling usual narrative propaganda of the dangers of the terrorists and the extreme crazies living in your neighborhood and stuff like that. And that over the last few weeks, that seems to have dropped off a lot. So it makes me think, maybe they're about to throw something out there to really, throw a spanner in the works. And then hearing the Pope saying, "Oh, nuclear weapons, nuclear," it made me think, like, they're trying to plant seeds again. Maybe it's just another, what could I call it, a psyop feeder, as in they put little ideas out there because they know the general populace will carry them and spread them, and it becomes something they can then manipulate as a psyop, like the 311. I'm not saying there's nothing to that theory in particular, but the system will quite happily feed something like that because they know it will occupy a large demographic of the public into chasing rabbits, and that takes them away from noticing what they're up to. Yeah, it distracts people like the magician's trickery. But it's just something I noticed recently, you know, as we're coming up to these elections, stuff like that seems to have died down a bit.
Well, there was that statement by Macron about NATO being mad in the head, because of what America and Turkey did over the ISIS thing. But you've got to remember, the thing about France is that, they were the ones that used to sell weapons to Saddam and Libya, and Syria, probably still do, not forgetting Argentina. For some reason, France always seemed to be the ones that would supply a lot of weapons to the dodgiest people. And so, with Macron complaining about NATO, maybe they're losing money. That's what it's all about. I did learn something today. This is quite interesting. Ghislaine Maxwell, she was spotted after being in London in June with Prince Andrew coming out of his house. So what did she do? I'm going to have to read this because this is something I didn't know. And I was going to jump in and say, talking about hunting rabbits. Did you know that Nick Mason, the old drummer from Pink Floyd, and Roger Waters are both members of the Countryside Commission charity, which supports fox hunting? Roger Waters, I didn't know that. But it gets deeper because Prince Andrew 59 met up with Maxwell 57, who is an old friend of his, on June 6 inside the Prince's private palace quarters. She then set off on the Cash and Rocket charity motoring rally from London to Monaco, sharing a car with Nettie Mason, the wife of Pink Floyd rock star Nick Mason. This is Ghislaine Maxwell driving around with the wife of Pink Floyd. I think this was from this week. 25th of November. And so we're talking about last June. So this was last June, just 5 months ago. Ghislaine Maxwell, the story had broken, and she's driving in a car with the wife of Pink Floyd rock star Nick Mason. I found that bloody strange. It just, who would want to? Who'd want to get in the same car as her?
It's these lovely events, isn't it? These big rich events they put on for themselves and just cruise around in their cars. That's how they pass their time, and then meet up in Geneva with all the other sado celebrities who are licking arse and even eating cows' arse, some of them actually. I've seen that in that celebrity thing. So, they'll do anything.
Oh, there she is.
Was that Extinction Rebellion? Further up, all the women in the red dresses.
Well, no, this was Paris Hilton, Slow Green. Even their names are degenerate. For a glamorous all-woman supercar rally, which finished 4 days later in Monaco. But apparently they didn't make any money.
There, all the Hollywood housewives or whatever it is.
There she is, Nick Mason. Shine on, you crazy diamond. Yep.
He doesn't give a shit, does he?
£0 raised.
It's all that linking, isn't it, to royals and everything, and this is how all this circle, which they don't report on often, or you certainly don't hear it in the main news, do you? You have to go and troll around these sort of these type of what's it called, those female ones or whatever, on the Daily Mail or whatever, those sorts of gossip sites or whatever. And that's where you'll find some of that, but they don't really talk about it. They're not really going to discuss what they're up to, now and again maybe, but it's that's how it is.
Earlier on that picture I had of Prince Charles, that was in response, I think, to the Andrew interview. He's getting up there and he's trying to play, the royal family's sex life. It's a bit like a carry-on film, isn't it? There's Prince Charles and the big naked Maori. It's all a bit of fun and games for the royal family.
Yeah,
know?
that's how they present it as, and people go, "Oh, look at them having a bit of fun and having this, whatever." But again, that's how they psychologically, maneuver themselves into a position of, it's okay, in your mind, and then normal. It's just the things people do these days. Like I was mentioning that celebrity thing. I'm a Celebrity, which is on in the UK, which they get people to eat all sorts of animal parts. Generally, it's genitals, by the way. It's never something that's
Yeah.
so it's a kangaroo testicle or something horrible, and they have to. And I watched it. Was it on Saturday? I had some friends over and someone wanted to watch it. So, and they were eating. What was it? Cow's anus. Yeah, I had to eat it and swallow it, and cow's eyes, which that Jenner fella. He's a bloke, man spreading. I mean, he's a con man if ever there was one. I don't know who this guy is. It the one who's linked to the Kardashians or whatever. Complete joke. Yeah, he's a bloke. He's a bloke. He's having a laugh. He's just creaming money in and just say, "Yeah, I'll do that." He's sitting there like, it's like
He
so
never,
obvious. Anyway,
he never had the full. He never had
yeah,
the full up.
yeah,
I was
no,
explaining this to my family the other day because they were on about it, and I said, he's never had the full up. He's promoted as this icon of the transgender agenda, which is the whole point for me. I know we talked about it before, and Jeff C's covered this topic really well. He's promoted as like the icon figure, the leader of that transgender agenda. And yet when it came to the snip, the crunch, he put out a statement saying that he was happy the way he was. He wasn't going to go ahead with the full up, basically, to paraphrase it.
And to see how he was like, how his body language was and everything, the man spreading, the sitting there, like he's having a laugh. He's just like, yeah, mate, you're a bloke. It's like, he's just like, it's obvious. It's like, there's no way he's just playing this role. And now they have you off, and he ate that cow's eye. He had a cow's eye, and he didn't even flinch. He chewed it all down, no problem. And I thought, yeah, a bunch of freaks in there. They'll just.
It's a bit of a weird connection, but it makes me think about the cattle mutilation. Is there some? I know, like you say, they deliberately get the so-called celebrities. They deliberately get them to eat obnoxious things. That's the whole sort of trial by testing them, giving them penises and whatever. But it just made me wonder, like, is there a reason why they went for the cow rather than some other animal? And that made me think of the cattle mutilation kind of connection. But then they would have had them eating the lips and tongue and stuff as well. Maybe that was for later on the sandwiches.
Yeah.
Nice bit of cow's tongue on a sandwich.
Talking about cattle, I mean, this reminds me of Charles, like he's bidding at a slave auction. Yeah.
But what you can't see is that the guy behind him is just, in his other hand, he's handing him a pair of scissors. And Charles is just getting ready to reach forward and going, oi! He's going to snip it off. So I need that foreskin. So that boy there, he's not a member of the club. Look, he's got an extra bit on his willy. We need to snip it off quick.
There's another thing I think you did kind of mention it on the free speech, and that's that a lot of people don't have free speech because they can't put their ideas into the words. They don't have the words to put their true ideas, to express them. They have to use a language that is, there was a video the other day, Police Abusing Powers put it up, and he can be a bit of a racist, and there was an Asian guy standing for the Tory party going around South London constituent, and this Asian kid or Muslim kid is having a real go at him in the street. He said, "What the fuck are you doing around here? Why don't you go to a white country?" He didn't have the word for county, borough, district, voting ward. He couldn't think of the word for what it is. What are the places over there where other people live? Well, that's over there. He doesn't have. But that's a part of living in the big mega city. You're not supposed to have any pride in your area, your district. And
unless you channel it into the gang culture and go and visit a cinema multiplex where you can stab other people from a different gang. Then you can have pride in your neighbourhood, yeah? Who's got the biggest chopper?
It actually used to be town. People would call it town, wouldn't they? If you're a Tottenham supporter, you're from Tottenham Town. You know, you're Arsenal Town. That, you know, that even that was not the correct word, I suppose. Well, it would have been once. But, you know, that's a part of it, yeah? He can't even express himself because he's not given any pride in where he comes from. Yeah, all he knows is he's in a poor area and most of the people around him are the same colour as him. You know, I didn't take it as, you know, telling the guy to go to a white country. He just couldn't think of the fucking word because, you know, they don't use it in everyday language, do they? Your local council, it's almost like there's one council for the whole country. There's one, you know, there's one city and it is the whole world.
Yeah, or it's becoming more so that way because of the reduction of travel in one way or another. You know, I know people think that might sound a bit sort of back to front because there seems to be more people on the roads now than there ever were. But often they're not traveling that far. You know, they might go to and from work, they might go to and from the shops or something, you know, but they're not necessarily traveling any great distance. And the majority of their life revolves around quite a small area, quite a small locality, in relevance to the rest of the globe. And
I watched that same video about Madonna drinking her pee, yeah, and Pockets of the Future featured her video, a short piece from her video from the European Song Contest, yeah, and I went and looked at the whole thing. And she did about 3 records, but the last one is really weird. It's like not everybody from the past is going to make it to the future. Yeah, and it was, I mean, it's a really, you know, end times song. Yeah, it's worth just checking.
It's also a bit of a non-statement. It's like, how far from the past are you talking about, and how far into the future are you talking about? Because I'm most likely not going to be here in 100 years. So you're making a completely mute point. You know, there's nothing to what you're saying, basically. It sounds poetic enough to be put in song lyrics. Yeah, well, yeah, her kind of song lyrics. But
well, I got the message. You know, a big change is coming, and not everybody's going to be a part of the survivors. Literally,
that's that has been an ongoing main narrative in a lot of the different stuff. Yeah, I think it was Jeff the other day. I was listening to it. I'm sure I've heard other people mention this as well. The TikTok meme, which has been building up, certainly a lot more recently. I think it's in some main TV shows as well at the moment. It keeps sort of like getting dropped in different shows, and they keep sort of pushing on that point of, you know, any minute now, any moment now, soon. And it's that classic kind of, you know, like dangling the carrot kind of thing. You know, the doom is just over the horizon, but the horizon's nearly here. It's nearly here. It's nearly here. It's going to happen any minute. Yeah, tick-tock.
Watchmen.
That's it, Watchmen. Yeah.
I watched 2010 Space Odyssey the other day, and it was interesting because the reason I went and watched it was because Collective Learning, Rob Iger, was saying how The Shining, yeah, Stephen King absolutely hated The Shining, and now they've brought out a sequel to it, which he says it's okay, but then he spends an hour telling you what's wrong with it, so it couldn't have been that good. And it was the same thing with 2001. Arthur C. Clarke didn't like the film at all, yeah. And so like he had to wait about 20 years till he could make the sequel himself. And you could absolutely see it was a completely different mind that made 2001. Arthur C. Clarke, yeah. Kubrick had hope for the future, and he left the film with hope for the future. But Arthur C. Clarke,
and also Gary, he left the set to make the fake moon landing as well. Some would say.
Yeah. And Arthur C. Clarke, though, like it's not enough that you might transition if you go out to Jupiter or something. No, if you do transition, you've got to do something physical for the people that are here. That was 2010, if you've seen it, yeah? The monolith turns out to be an alien that decides to turn Jupiter into a second sun. Yeah, and I'm thinking, well, that's a bit bloody weird, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's not really necessary or anything, is it? Yeah, but I mean, it's a different mind. I can see Clark and Mason as well, for sure. Yeah,
it's a show of power, and I think that's why he sort of put it in the story in that way, or it's part of the story in the way that it is, because it's a demonstration of that. I can't think of the name of the scale. It's like the scale of civilizations. If you're a level 0, you have the command of the energy on the planet that you're on. And if you're to get to level 1, you have to be able to command all of the energy within your own solar system. And then level 2 is within the galaxy, I think. And then level 3 is something else. I might be getting that wrong. But the point is, it's like that level stepping of the capability of the civilization. So I think the reason he does that in the story is to sort of make a point of, like, this civilization is so advanced that in that scale, they would be considered like easily one full step ahead of us, which is why they can do things like turn a planet or turn a gas giant into a sun. They can radically alter the structure of a solar system. It's more about, I think, emphasizing their level of capability. So it reinforces that little old you kind of thing, that there's some alien civilization out there that's so far advanced that they can do things like just turn something into a sun.
It also absolutely turns into a physical alien thing. Whereas in the first film, it could have been the divine that was helping him become a star child. Yeah.
Yeah, Kubrick definitely, I think, always includes linkages to the spiritual or the divine, whereas Arthur C. Clarke, no, he was all materialism. That's interesting connection, considering some of the other stuff we've talked about recently. Yeah? The constant reinforcing that I call it the system, just for a general label. The constant reinforcing that the system applies in that way. They want people to think only in physical, in materialistic terms, and to conceive of, or to only be able to conceive of the world in materialistic terms. So this is why the connection with the ancient aliens principle or theory. Yeah, because if you've got questions about where did we come from, what gives us this ability to live, and all this kind of question, it's like, oh, well, it's not because of some kind of God or divine energy. No, it's just because of aliens. So it keeps it fixated in the material.
Yeah. If you want to get onto the spiritual thing, I noticed something the other day. Yeah, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, you can take different characters and you can see that they're playing. Like Aragorn is playing Jesus. Yeah, and I thought so. I held that in my mind and I went through what I know of the film, and lo and behold, I thought, oh, hang on a minute. What about the truth? What about the soldiers that were underneath the hill? Yeah, he goes into hell, and he raises the dead and brings them back as an army. It's known as the harrowing of hell, and in the book, in the film, it's called Dun Harrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly the same name. Yeah, so,
harrow is an old English word. Yeah, it means that connection. Yeah, the home of the dead, or the place of the dead.
Yeah, and the harrowing of hell. That's what it's termed as. The time just after the crucifixion. So yeah, there are lots of stories in there. Parallel divine stories. Yeah, I was surprised.
The whole thing is the retelling of the Christian narrative.
Yeah, and of course, then there's a passage in the Bible where it says, and your father has prepared a wedding for you. So he gets married at the end. But then who is Frodo? Frodo must be God. Because Aragorn, he gets down on his knee to him and says, nobody bows to you. You're the one that's right up there.
Well, that's where I'd debate a little bit. You're saying Aragorn is meant to be Jesus, maybe the physical form of Jesus, but I would argue that really Frodo is the Jesus character in that story. He represents the Christ consciousness, the Christ self, or the true ascension of a being into a Christ, into the Christ. Yeah. So maybe, but in the way you're describing it, yeah, maybe that's what he was doing. It was more the kind of Jungian archetype separation of there is the true self, which is already divine, you know, it has that divine, direct divine connection. So that's like the true Christ self. And then there is the physical personage that ends up moving to that position, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it's all destiny as well.
Whole Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
it's filled with Jungian archetypes. Like the whole thing, all the characters in it are all different subtypes and whatever.
Yeah, and those parts of what Aragorn is doing is all part of destiny. Yeah, it's all been foretold in prophecy. Yeah,
So he was in effect just going through the motions.
Yeah, playing out the script for the physical part. Yeah,
he was the sword. He carries the sword, but he represents the sword. Yeah, he himself was the sword. I think as well. That's why Tolkien deliberately makes those old English connections in his use of language, like the names and stuff like that, all connect back to old English connections. And I'm certain Tolkien was doing that deliberately because he wanted some of those meanings to carry into what he was putting in the story. So the reason it's R, like Aragorn, the AR prefix gives certain etymological connotations to the name. You know, when he wrote the history of the High Men, it's basically the same storyline as the history of Atlantis. You know, that's what he does in the story. It's in the Silmarillion rather than the Lord of the Rings, but it's all there in the background of the main story that takes place in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's a shame they have to weave it into stories, and we don't take that sort of stuff seriously like we should, I think, especially with the ancient past being sort of tried to be covered up, or no more research or whatever it is. They shut down any sort of what you call real connection back to any ancient time where we had, much more going on with ourselves and more connected with ourselves. And it seems that as we've gone through eons of time, I'd say, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years even, we've been here. They'll have you believe we've only been here 5 minutes, don't you know? It's like it's bollocks. And as we go through time, they've changed. It's changed into that material world that we have now, which makes it such an even bigger challenge, if you like, as we go through our learning and our evolution and our soul growth and everything else. That we're in these times now. We have to now go through another switch and a change back. And it's a process of that. And as we get the younger ones to come through, and their numbers are bigger than what our numbers were, say, in understanding things better, and then people getting on it and slowly shifting the power back. And then we're not going to go down this horrible dystopian kind of future tech society they want us all living in the sense of where it's all controlled and everything else. Maybe we'll get our way out of that.
There is, I've noticed a hell of a despair around, and like people, instinctively feel this dystopian future coming, and like it's inevitable, and it's almost like they're pushing the extinction of the race, like. And I think all my parents, grandparents, bloody hell, for 10,000 years, we've just got on with life and dealt with it, and all of a sudden we can't.
Everything's a problem.
Right. Yeah, all of a sudden we can't do it no more. We did all right up to it, 10,000 years, saber-toothed tigers, inventing fire, but now all of a sudden, no, it's all too hard. It's all too much.
Yeah, and if the internet stopped working for everyone tomorrow, the whole world would stop.
There was a funny story today. There was a girl, she was at a Cambridge talk, of archaeologists, and she'd gone to university to do a talk for sexual abuse in the workplace of archaeological digs. So this was it. No, it's sexual harassment and abuse, you know, at an archaeological dig. And apparently there's a lot of it. Yeah, she's written a whole paper on it. And she got up on the stage of this place and got an award for it. And as soon as the title of it was read out, there's a whole big bunch of guys at the back of the room just started laughing, yeah. And she started crying, you know, and it made the news headlines. I mean, it's just fucking ridiculous, you know, snowflake.
I can just imagine him now. Hey, look at the size of my trowel. Can I feel your brush?
I bet most of them were thinking, Christ, you're joking. I was out in Egypt, it's 120. I didn't feel like touching a woman. Or they're thinking, what, that muddy old field up in Scotland? You're joking, mate. It was freezing. You know, I mean, she must have gone. She must have really searched to find this, yeah. And it's the Me Too generation. Oh, man looked at me funny once when I was on a dig, and she's put all this rubbish together. And actually, instead of doing archaeology, she's done a study on abuse at archaeological sites. Unbelievable. Just
those subjects will invade every other area, won't they? Yeah, they've got to be pushed into every other area. So it affects everything from the foundational level upwards.
Oh, was it Jeff C did that woman the other day, and she was doing, was it a TED talk or was it just on television, I think, wasn't it? And she was talking about how women have been there through evolution. It wasn't just the men that went out and hunted, you know, women would have been right next to them.
Right, yeah.
It was absolutely sure. You know, this is
I think it's another one of those false dichotomy questions, debates. You know, somebody like her is deliberately trying to drag that to one extreme. The reality was probably that, occasionally women probably would be out on the hunt for some reason. You know, maybe there was a lack of available hunters. Maybe this one particular woman was just inclined to do that kind of thing and wouldn't be told what to do. Yeah. But the point is somebody like her, that person he was talking about, are taking that kind of concept, the exception to the rule kind of thing, and stretching it to an extreme to make a political point. You know, the reality was the vast majority of that kind of task was done by the males, just simply because the males were made for that kind of task. And I know that sounds corny to some people, but they are better, more aptly, they have the more abilities, they have better abilities. Man, words are just all over the place tonight.
Is that Mercury retrograde?
It's the last few bits falling out.
That doesn't sound wrong at all. In fact, the thing about this woman is, you know, there is an element of the divine feminine that's been ignored and has been cut out of everything since somebody made up the story about Adam and Eve. They've been dissing women, you know, they're the nigger of the world. And this woman is just not helping that, because instead of coming up and being honest and saying that you should treat women equally because the preparation of food is just as important as the catching of it, that would bring the divine feminine back into the narrative in a way that people can understand. But, you know, she's still playing like men are better than women. And look, women are either sick or they're stupid, or look at this one, she's so stupid she doesn't even know it. See how stupid women are? You know, she's playing right into the misogynist playbook.
Separation as well, you know, separation. You know, what's supposed to be separated, you know.
She's
putting a wedge between the divine coupling.
The
whole, I know this gets a bit esoteric and doesn't exactly suit everyone's idea of whatever religion or whatever, but there is a divine coupling in this reality in many different ways, at many different layers within the complexity of what we call this reality, this experience. There is a dualistic element, a dualism of masculine and feminine and they're not separate. They're two parts of the same thing. I was sort of mentioned this before we come on air about the diamond and the diode, but with the D added on the end, it makes it monde, which is the old French word for the world. So it's like the two in the world, and this is why they sell the cliche that a diamond is what you give to somebody when you get him married and whatever, because it's the coupling of the two. But really, it's about the diamond, the two in one. Yeah, we see one thing, reality, but within that reality, almost everything has this aspect of dualism to it, a masculine and a female element to it. But they're not separate. They work together and complement each other. And one is better at some things and the other one is better at other things, and they each fill in the inabilities that the other one has. So they work perfectly together. And the system, I said the system loosely in that generalized label, puts out that propaganda and that miseducation and the misconception, the false dichotomies, etc., that it's either one or the other, and one is more superior to the other in some form. No, they've got to both work together. The system just sticks a pretend wedge in between them and then tries to persuade each side that they're either better or worse than the other side.
And that's the first problem we have to deal with is a going forward thing with most people, because they do feel that that's two separate things. It's in actual fact, it has to be working together, like you say. Otherwise, it doesn't. It falls apart as we see society, as we see things go the way they've been going. Now they've hijacked us in all various ways, shapes and forms, mentally, physically, everything. They've tried to change what we are and how we think, and we've got to think in this really, sort of, like I say, just look what's available to you in this sort of world of mass media and shit, and it's hard to find anything that's wholesome and good or something that would expand you. You can find it, but most of the stuff you're in the shop front window of, like the stuff they're firing in movies and everything else, they're all pretty, glum and dark things, and not really helping you grow internally, making you sad, fearful, melancholy, whatever, making you feel up and down, but not doing anything per se. And then the ideas that are woven within these scripts and within these acts that, in these movies and documentaries and soap operas and everything else is those things that cement how we are with each other in the normal world, which is this separation thing, because they just they mirror it onto the screen and they mirror it back at you and they confirm it. It's like always confirming itself, confirming that that's how it is when it isn't. So we'd start there first, like everybody's the same, equal in that sense, male and female. We have to get on with it, and off we go.
And appreciate another thing I'd add is appreciate the differences between you, because those differences are what make you complementary. Yeah. Because and I don't mean differences as in things you argue about and shit like that. No, I mean the differences in the fact that one is good at certain things that the other one is not good at, so they complement each other. When you can't, when one side can't do a particular thing, the other side is really good at it. So, the differences between us are where the natural, I'm being careful about how to say this, but it's easy to just say the natural laws, just the way this reality works, the law of correspondence. If there's if something's missing on one side, then the other side sort of fills in that thing that's missing. I'm not describing it very well. A little bit like the yin yang. The seed of one is inside the other, and vice versa. But I mean also in the fact that the law of correspondence means if you're missing some ability on one side of that dualistic reality, then the other side fills in that missing part, so it complements. So when the two work together, you become capable of everything, not just only some things. Men can't give birth, but a man and a woman together can produce a child. So the two working together complement the failings of the one side or the other, or the missing element of one side or the other.
But the suppression side, if you suppress it, or you don't, let both sides grow equally in the right way, then again, like I'd say, we get the chaos or we get problems, and we've seen that throughout. Seems history. I always like that thing I saw months ago saying that violence in this it's a tribe somewhere out in Borneo somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but there's a tribe there still which is cut off from the rest of the world, and in their tribe, violence is seen as a mental illness, and everybody's equal. If there's somebody down below, they bring them up. If there's somebody too high ego-wise or whatever, they bring them back down again.
Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Well, that's
so
one of the versions of the same thing from Africa, South Africa.
And that's what I mean. People do. It's always like from birth we're given, things as little boys to play with guns and cowboy hats back in the day or whatever it was. Now they're given games that you can go and kill people. With not on the game, but it's giving that violence that's already sort of woven into kids, and it's okay. It's not real. So it's okay to do it. So it's kind of setting them off on completely the wrong foot. And as I always say, that's an old saying we've all said, how to defeat your enemy, bring up his children. They see us as an enemy in that sense. The system is wanting to get in there and control children like we've never seen before, especially in the last few years with all the agendas for the gender agendas and all that stuff going on. So, they get in there with the kids and they completely, as you say, with the education system, it will give them the view of the world that they want them to have, not, so that needs, once that's changed, once we can get a better holistic education system going rather than the one we've got currently for the children, and then we'd see it change in a couple of generations, but that has to start sort of now, for that to happen. But they'll do their best to, suppress that and keep that education system the way it is. And we know it's all wrong. Even teachers say it's wrong, and professors and everything have spoken out against the whole system of how we do what we do with our kids. So it's something that people know about, and maybe going forward it will happen. This whole thing will just stop doing what it's doing to the kids' heads.
I think the climate thing might be one to break it, because in a way it could backfire on them that they lump all the conspiracy theories together. But the climate change thing is really breaking. People are really seeing through it.
Yeah, well,
and
good.
They say, well, if that's true about the climate, if they were really lying about it, or they were so stupid that they got it wrong, give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're wrong about the vaccines as well. Maybe they're wrong about a lot of other things.
That is what we've been experiencing for the past several years, maybe longer. It's accelerating, but it is that process of once the dam has been breached, once the levee breaks. I know a lot of poetic corniness, but once the process begins, it gradually increases until it reaches a crescendo. It grows, it accelerates, and that's, I think, what we've been experiencing for the past several years. So that's why, to me, it all adds together as being what could be termed the revelation or the apocalypse. And this is why, like I've said before, I agree with a lot of what a lot of the religious people talk about of what's going on at the moment. It is becoming like that revelation, because a lot of the things that most people used to accept as being the way the world worked, if they even knew about them, they may have been ignorant to them or nescient of them. But these things are starting to be revealed to them in one way or another, either by accident or deliberately, because the system needs everybody to accept the paradigm shift. So they are, or have been, slowly allowing this stuff out into the public, so it degrades the old paradigm and the public clamours for the new paradigm. So it's been accelerating for the past few years, and this year alone, it staggers me sometimes at just how much stuff has happened just within this 1 year. And when you look at the last several years and then the last decade, 2 decades, for me personally, was probably from around the first Iraq war, when I started to see the kind of arc of the geopolitical game that was happening. And it's taken that long, and now the things that are happening are so quick. It's like nearly every time we come on, once a week, there's a load of stuff that we could talk about. Oh, this happened and that happened, and this was admitted, and this was revealed, and this has been found out. And that's why I say it can be called the awakening, because there is a process occurring where some of it may not be natural, some of it is being deliberately crafted. They are trying to ride the tiger of a situation that they know will naturally occur. It's like somebody coming out of amnesia or out of hypnotic state. As they are coming to their senses again, the deceptions, the distractions, the illusions, and all that kind of matrix effect fall away, and it quickly spreads. And once it starts, it accelerates.
Yeah.
So
once the lid, once the lid's off the bottle, isn't it?
Just to sort of do my usual kind of almost caveat in a way, but I know I talk a lot about. I talk about a lot of dark subjects and dark ideas when I'm ranting about shit that's happening, but I wouldn't be still here doing this if I were not still an optimist. I'm still optimistic that it is going a better direction, and that the more energy people put into going that other direction, the better it's going to be and the quicker it's going to happen. Yeah. So I don't think the world's going to end, in the classic kind of doomsday conspiracy element, but definitely a lot of stuff that you have been used to and a lot of things that could be described as being part of your world are being systematically taken apart and destroyed. That's why for years now I've described it as that bereavement process, because the world you knew has died, and you are going through the process of accepting that death and dealing with it and changing the way you now live to account for the fact that something has gone, something has died. It's over. The old way of this world running, the way it used to run, is done. We're going through the fallout phase of like, oh shit, okay, well, how do we do this now? Now that old way of doing it has gone, how do we do it now instead?
Yeah. Right. If you can screen share for me, you're not alone, man. There are others out there trying to help with this. Yeah, this is Madonna at the Eurovision Song Contest. Yeah, she's helping, man. She's doing her bit. Yeah.
Oh man, imagine that!
You can see that
alarm. Madonna screeching at your alarm clock. Like, wake up! Wake up!
Wake up and drink your pee-pee.
Yeah. It'd be like a really more horrible version of THX 1138, where you go to the mirror, instead of the voice, you just see her face. Drink your own pee. Drink your own pee. Oh dear. Sorry, it's silly. All right, it's 10 to the hour, so maybe that's a good chance to start wrapping it up. And I've tried to look into the chat a few times, but I was just getting too distracted from what Peter and Gary were saying. So sorry. I want to concentrate on what's being talked about and not get drawn into trying to read what everyone's typing in the chat, because I'm sure, well, for people who come back and listen again, maybe on a regular basis, they're probably used to that fact now. I'm not the kind of content creator that can concentrate on the chat and reply to everything that's happening in the chat while I'm doing my thing in the broadcast. I can do multitasking, but I'm not that good at doing that kind of multitasking. So I tend to come back to it at a later date. So hello, thank you to everyone in the chat room. I know the cache on my chat room has only gone back so far. It only goes back to 9:25, so only about half an hour. So apologies to people who may have been in the chat room earlier. If I didn't see you, sorry. It's not. I'm not ignoring. It's just Google has decided to, reduce the amount of people I could actually see in the chat room. Let's try scrolling this one back. This one goes back a bit further. Yeah, the chat room on Firefox goes back a little bit further. So I'll do quick scrolls down, shout out to the ones I can still see in the chat room anyway. Super Leads, hello. Hope you're all right, mate. New Being, hello. Dotty, cannabis-based life form, hello. And Jack Locke, hello. I don't know if you heard what I was ranting about earlier. I won't go over it again. I'm sure you can just rewind if you want to hear it. Cardini, hello. Thanks for joining us. And Apple Charlotte, hello. And Bright, hello, Bright. Please, yeah. Don't swamp the chat room. And I know I saw other people in the chat as well. There was a few people earlier on. Try and remember. I know I saw Linda Cloud in there earlier, and
New Being.
I think I said New Being. Hello.
Oh, did you?
I think I did. Yeah, earlier on. I'm trying to scroll and read names quicker and quicker. And it's just like the quicker I go, the more it takes up my attention. So, Eman Pudama, hello. I know I saw other names in the chat. And
Dr. Rock was in as well. So
Benno, hello. Nick GB, hello. I never mentioned chemtrails. What was that? 9:45, 10 minutes or so ago, everyone was talking about the agenda narratives, yeah, and the celebrities, yeah. Blazing Stars, hello. So related to Lisbon Lyme's disease? I don't know. I think I might be missing some of the conversation with that. I'm still scrolling. I think I mentioned everybody so far that I've seen. James Owen, hello, thank you. I don't know, were you in the chat room earlier, mate? Sorry if I didn't notice. I was too busy getting into me rambling as quick as I could. Yeah, thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for joining in the chat room if you wanted to. Like I've said many times, it's there for you to make use of, but not abuse. If you take the piss too much, you will get booted out. But yeah, thank you for joining in, folks in the chat, and people tuning in, and the time travelers who watch after the live broadcasts and all that good stuff. I'm sure we will be discussing more about the news and the latest news events and stuff on Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel, or Pete's channel.
Yep.
And we may very well go over some of the bits we mentioned tonight, some of the news events.
Yes, there's plenty, like you say, every week, plenty to talk about.
More every week, it seems.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
For myself, it's got to the stage, and this was partly the reason why I started doing this particular broadcast, because I felt like it had got to the stage where if you want to, there's an absolute mine of resource out there if you want to talk about like geopolitical events and stuff like that. There's a never-ending supply of it, and it's more so now than ever. There's loads of stuff that you could be going over, and that just made me feel like, well, that means that there's other stuff that we could be talking about that is not as pushed by the system. The system wants us to talk about things like some of the celebrity stuff and whatever. I think it was New Being that mentioned it last week in the chat. Yeah, I was ranting about
Yeah.
Prince Andrew. And one of the questions is, are they putting that in front of us now because it's working as a distraction because we're all now talking about Prince Andrew? And I say all, generalizing, but I found it interesting over this last week that a lot of the mainstream media has been including it in one way or another. It's popped up in all the various comedy shows and stuff like that. That I thought was quite interesting that it's not exactly been shut down by the royal household.
No, it hasn't. No.
There's been no outright denotice, and there hasn't even been any kind of like press statement to say, we know that this situation is being talked about by the public, but we don't like the general media to be covering it overly, But there's just been loads. It's been everywhere. It's been on the news. It's been on comedy shows. It's the talking point. And that was partly what left me thinking, they're doing it deliberately at this time, and it's occupying everybody's thinking, and it's even in the mainstream media, such that they are scapegoating him, they're railroading him, they're throwing him under the bus deliberately, and they're encouraging the public to actually participate in that. So they're encouraging you to get rid of that chapter.
Yeah.
I just put a link in the comments for that astrology thing, the astrology video I put up. It's cool. Andrew's birth chart, cross-referenced against the very day that he made that Newsnight interview. It's quite a long thing, about 24 minutes, yeah? First of all, she goes into Andrew's birth chart and what kind of bloke he is and all the rest of it. You can say there's a lot of positive bias there, which there is in a lot of astrology. But then when she gets on to the day that the interview happened and how it relates to his birth chart, you can really see some synergy there. Yeah, you can see how it was not the best day to do an interview. Yeah, there's crosses and tensions all over the place, and a lot of them relate to the actual subject that he's getting done for as well. Young girls, that's in his chart. It's got quite an interesting looking chart, actually. Yeah, Venus and Mars right next to each other, and lots of other stuff. Yeah, it's worth a look if you're into astrology.
That indicates, well, to me, my bias, whatever. To me, it indicates that somebody knowingly encouraged him to do it at that time because they realised there would be this kind of effect on him, and he'd make a complete kibosh of it and, reveal himself, which he clearly did. Yeah. So I think he was very much thrown under the bus deliberately. And I'm not saying that to in any way suggest that he's innocent or, no, not at all, but they will eat their own. So when they feel the time is right or the need is there, they'll quite happily throw one of their own to the baying mob and, let them get killed by the mob.
That could even be a kind of Netanyahu to the Queen phone call. Oh, that wasn't the only girl Andrew slept with. I know, because I've seen the pictures, madam. It could even be a continuation of the blackmail. Now, tell him to get out there and do an interview and draw the spotlight away from other people. It wouldn't surprise me, huh? I mean, what do you think they blackmail people for?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned Netanyahu because he just got charged with bribery and corruption a couple of days ago.
And yet he hasn't been.
Yeah.
He hasn't been arrested or incarcerated.
No.
He's actually, last I saw, I think yesterday, he's in negotiations with some other guy who's going to be the prime minister. So what was the point of him being convicted for this stuff? What does it mean? Anything?
Exactly.
I think like Italy, they can't actually charge him while he's still in office. They have to wait until he leaves office, which means like Berlusconi, he's got 2 or 3 years to cover it up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And to try and get re-elected.
Leave it at that point. Thanks again for tuning in, folks. Check Pete's channel, Reality Chat, Wednesday night. Steve Tagoose will be on Thursday night with a mystery show. I'm sure, you know, there's going to be other stuff during the week at some point. I've got to get my BitChute channel sorted out and stuff like that. But we will be back again soon. Hopefully be back on next Monday. As far as I know, I've got no other plans. But I will take time off over Christmas. So just sort of give advance notice. At some point, I'll decide which particular weeks. But I probably will be off air for at least a couple of weeks over the Christmas period.
But I think Christmas Day's on the Wednesday, so I won't be on anyway. For a New Year's Day, so it's a couple of weeks. It will be a break, just a holiday break, which we haven't had one for ages. Anyway, go on.
That was it, yeah. More likely next a couple of weeks, yeah. I still ain't, you know, done any of the Christmassy stuff yet. I ain't even been shopping for anything yet. So typical man, you know, get you a bunch of flowers from the petrol station.
Well, we'll be talking about Black Friday probably next Monday, if not Wednesday as well, because it's Black Week now, isn't it? It's no longer
It's happening,
Friday.
yes. Yeah. It's already underway.
Actually, we didn't realise, did we? We're actually in Black Year. Yeah.
The new horror, the new scourge of the modern centuries. Oh, can I get my goods delivered? So get off your ass, walk down the road, go to the shop and buy it with cash. Even better, find somebody that's got something that you want and trade with them, barter with them. But anyway, yeah, don't want to start ranting about all that commercial Christmas shit. Not yet. We'll do that next week.
No. Yeah.
All right, thanks
anyway,
again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining in, guys. Thanks again, folks. Cat cheese. I'm going to click the button, the right button this time. Cat cheese. And that button.